in our last video where we talked about Moon Knight, we kind of discussed how exciting it was that it was a new Marvel property and Oscar Isaac was carrying the whole thing and he was doing such a good job, and that there was a twist at the end of episode 4 where we left off. And speaking of, spoilers ahead for those who haven't seen Moon Knight but are watching this anyway or listening to this
Doctor
anyway.
Strange later on.
And Doctor Strange later on, yeah. So the twist being obviously Mark wakes up in a mental hospital and Harrow, the villain, is his psychiatrist or whatever position he was in. They go through this whole thing where in episode 5, there's a lot of trauma that Mark relives and Steven gets to see, and it's kind of like a bottled like backstory episode, and it's done really, really well. And then we get to the finale in episode 6 where he comes back to reality and there's a big fight between a couple of different people. I think before we get into details, let's just talk about our general thoughts. Like, did you think Moon Knight was a good show now that we've had time to like think about it?
No.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Explain.
The show went so hard downhill after episode 1. Because episode 1, I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. And then episode 6, I was like, wow, that kind of sucked. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are cool moments.
Yeah.
Especially in episode 5, but I guess the finale was such horse shit.
Why's that? What do you think?
I hated the finale hardcore. For one thing, episode 5 ends, and there's a lot of things they had to answer for.
Yeah, we talked about that when we finished watching the episode. It was just the fact that we knew there was only one episode left. And yeah, they had to take down Harrow. Harrow still had to release Amit. Like Mark had to come back to life. Like he was shot and dead, and he ended up in a field, kind of like in Wakandan culture. Like there's the ancestral plane in the Marvel universe, in like Egyptian culture. You end up in the field of reeds, I think. And so Mark was there at the end of episode 5. And so we were both thinking like, well, they have so many things that they have to tie up, and they have one more like 40-minute episode left.
And yeah, it turns out they're just going to hit the fast forward button and try to speed rush the entire thing.
Yeah. Like there was a whole, so when we get into episode 6, Mark wakes up because he in the afterworld, he goes back to rescue Steven, who had died at the episode, died, quote unquote, at the end of episode 5. He sacrifices himself, and then that act balances out the scales in his heart. So then, the gates to the real world open up, and they're able to escape back to the real world. And Harrow goes into the tomb with all of the other avatars that we saw in episode 3, something like that. All of the other avatars, like Anubis's avatar and Osiris's avatar and Isis's avatar, they all get their asses handed to them by Harrow, by one dude. And it's like, aren't Osiris and Anubis supposed to be like some of the strongest Egyptian gods like ever? It's the ones they're the ones that you hear about like as a kid. You're like Egyptian, you hear like Anubis and Cleopatra and King Tut, and they just get their asses handed to them, and we don't even see the fight. And so then Layla shows up, and she has to break Khonshu out of his little statue. But yeah, like David said, it all kind of rushes together because they have to finish everything really, really quickly. I didn't think as a whole the show was that. I thought it was good. I didn't think it was amazing. But I really liked the fight choreography in the last episode. Like when Moon Knight, comes back and he's fighting off all these dudes. He's switching between him and Mr. Knight because Mark and Steven are on even playing fields now. So there's a moment where Harrow grabs Moon Knight's cape, and then Moon Knight changes to Mr. Knight and loses the cape. So he's free, and then he punches the dude, and then turns back into Moon Knight. So I thought the combat was cool. We got a Kaiju Battle. Because Amit gets released and she starts sucking up souls and she turns into a giant, Godzilla-sized monster. So Khonshu comes out and he's a Godzilla-sized monster. So there's a specific shot where Moon Knight and Layla, who ends up getting powers because she becomes Teruet's avatar. Again, a lot of stuff, and they breeze through it, but there are cool moments. So, I don't know. They end up defeating Harrow, and, Amit gets sealed inside him, and then Khonshu at the very end of the episode, there are a couple of really important things that happen. Because first, like in the middle of, Mark and Layla beating all these dudes up and getting to Harrow, Mark blacks out again, and it skips ahead to Mark has like Arthur in his arm, like in his hand, and he's like, "Fuck, man, dude's about to die."
Yeah, that villain they've been building up for 6 episodes? Yeah, he gets defeated off screen.
He gets defeated off screen. Like Amit gets defeated, and then they seal Amit inside Arthur Harrow's dying body. And then the end of the episode, they skip back to like Mark and Steven waking up in their apartment, and it's almost as if nothing it's almost as if it was all a dream, And then the credits roll, and then there's a post-credit scene where we open up on, I think it's like a rehab center, because it's like a hospital, but also like I think Harrow might be, I don't know if he ever got arrested or whatever, but he's in like a similar position that like Mark and Steven were when they were in their, psych ward, and someone rolls them out on a wheelchair, and then you find out that it's Mark, like it looks like Mark, and Harrow gets thrown into the back of like a limo, and you hear Khonshu, and he's like dressed up in this nice suit, and Harrow is like, "You're not going to be able to get away with this. What are you going to do? You don't have an avatar." And then you see the driver, and he turns around, and then Khonshu is like, "Oh, but I do have an avatar. I don't need Steven. I don't need Mark. I want you to meet my friend Jake Lockley," who this whole time people on the internet have been like, Moon Knight canonically has like 3 major personalities. Like, where is Jake? Turns out Jake is like the homicidal, like violent one who has been like emerging in the past episodes where, Moon Knight kicks the shit out of people, and then Mark wakes up and he's like, "Steven, did you do that?" Steven was like, "No, I didn't do that." So we just meet Jake, and he pulls out a gun, and he says something in Spanish, which is really cool. I don't know why that's really cool. It's a fun moment for his character because, like, Oscar Isaac manages to make each of these personalities, like, gives them unique qualities to make them stand out from one another. So he says something in Spanish. He shoots Harrow with a silencer, I'm assuming that he kills him, because one of the conflicts at the end of the episode was like Khonshu was like, "Hey man, you got to kill this guy, otherwise Amit's going to be released again." And Mark's like, "Doesn't that make me no better than Arthur? I'm just going to leave him. We're just going to seal him. You do it." And then by the end of the episode, Khonshu was like, "I don't need Mark to do it. I got Jake to do it." So now Moon Knight is still around because technically Jake is still Khonshu's avatar. So like Moon Knight's going to come back, but I think it's going to be very interesting to see where they pick up from here. So for me, after all that being said, I don't honestly think it's one of the weaker Disney Plus shows, but I was thinking about this the other day, like how many of those shows would I go back and rewatch? Like how many would I voluntarily go back and rewatch from start to finish? I don't know if I'd go back and watch Moon Knight, even though he's like a new character, and it might be cool to like go back to the first couple episodes and pick up on little like Easter eggs and stuff. I thought it was fun, but honestly, I'm more excited to see him pop up in the future, possibly with Blade or possibly with better CG, because the CG throughout this whole show is kind of wonky. Not to discredit the animators or anything. I'm sure a lot of the work was done like in quarantine or like when we were figuring out quarantine. So like there's a chance that maybe the quality wasn't as high because the resources were limited. Any amount of things. But I don't know, man. So if I personally had to like, we don't have to do the ranking yet if you have more that you want to say.
I have a lot more I want to say.
Okay. So I will hold off on the ranking. What else? What else you got?
Just like first of all, Amit looks stupid. It's this giant goddess they've been building up for the whole episode, and it's just a giant alligator.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Egyptian gods are just like animal.
Well, Khonshu looked cool. It was like a vulture skull.
Well, because he was. I don't know if they ever explained it, but I think like Khonshu is supposed to be like an alive bird, but like the skin on his head had just like, like rotted away.
Well, whatever it was, he looked cool.
He did look cool.
And then Amit, just the giant battle.
Just a CG battle.
Yeah, man, I don't know. And then Harrow easily like officially like my bottom 5 villains.
That's fair.
Just he didn't do anything. Even the finale, he was just kind of like twirling his stupid cane around. And of course he gets defeated off screen. So that was a wet towel.
Yeah.
And just and then they kill him at the end. It's like, okay, well, that was a waste. And then oh my god. I still don't know what the hell's up with the psychiatric ward thing.
No idea. Because by the end of the show, you're still left wondering, like, did any of it actually happen?
Yeah, and then episode 5 ends with Steven getting trapped in the thing. Yeah, it's like, oh, that's sad. And then of course they bring him back for the finale because of course you have to.
Yeah, no one's just like in anime. Like most shonen anime, no one's actually dead. But if they are actually dead, they have a whole big thing for them, like throwing a funeral for Tony Stark. Or, having a hospital scene for Sir Night-Eye. It's the same thing. Like in Marvel shows, no one's actually dead until they get a whole 10-minute scene about them.
Yeah, it's just super frustrating because you were on the verge of greatness.
Yeah, I really do think if this show had stuck the landing a little better, or if it had been like a couple of episodes longer, maybe it could have been. It was
marketed as like a more mature show, but by the end of it, it's the same thing.
Yeah, and that's a huge complaint about Marvel in general, is that like the third acts of Marvel movies typically feel very similar, or like third acts of like the shows too. Like Hawkeye had a very similar third act in its show, where they're fighting off like a horde of enemies, so you can show off the hero's powers. And what did you feel about the Layla? Like, she becomes the Scarlet Scarab, which I think her dad is in the comics. But in this iteration, she takes up the mantle. What did you think about her basically, like, having Falcon powers?
Fine, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was cool that she finally accepted a role as an Avatar, even if it was, like, temporary. But yeah, I thought her, like I said, I will stand by the fact that I think the choreography in the fights in the last episode are still good. Like that's where all of the fight choreography, like production budget really went.
It's like what even happened with like the very last scene? It's like they wake up from the thing.
Yeah, he
gets up, trips, and then it cuts to black. Like what a horrible ending. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because it doesn't really. Like I said, I think if the point of the show is to kind of throw you off guard and keep you on your toes, it's like, for me, the way I saw it, like, was any of it real? Did any of it actually happen? Was it supposed to be this, like, sitcom ending where we end up in the same spot where we started, but, like, we're different for it, for everything that happened? I don't know. I think Moon Knight and Oscar Isaac particularly... Oscar Isaac carries this show. Like his performance, especially in episode 5. Oh my gosh. Like his whole backstory and how Steven was created. Like if I go back and watch any of this show, I'm watching that episode. Because I think that episode is like when in interviews Oscar Isaac was like, yeah, this show is my baby. I'm like, that's it. Like that episode fully encapsulates how much work like Oscar Isaac put into this role. So like I love that episode. Made me tear up a bunch. But yeah, then you could tell that like by the 6th episode, executives or maybe, the Marvel higher ups were like, okay, we got to wrap this up. We kind of know how we want this to end. So you can experiment in the middle couple of episodes, but we know how we got to end this thing.
It's like, I don't get why. Why does it need to only be 6 episodes? Like, could you not go 7? Could they not have gone 7? And properly gave everything enough time.
Yeah.
And for God's sake, the finale is the shortest episode of the series.
It is. Yeah.
It honestly blows my mind. I don't know just what their game plan was, but they fucking. Oops, sorry. This is not the.
That's
I
fine.
try not to, but sometimes it happens. But I'm sorry, they dropped the ball.
Yeah, like I think we agree in that regard. Like if they had just stuck the landing a little better and made the whole journey up till that point more worth it, I think the show would be a lot higher on my list of Disney Plus shows.
Didn't WandaVision have like 10 episodes?
Yeah, WandaVision had a bunch of episodes. Yeah.
Nope, got to get this wrapped up in 6.
Yeah. So, like I said, episode 5 is probably one of my single favorite episodes of like Marvel TV of Moon Knight. And like the show up until that point is, has its ups and downs where it's kind of slow for a little bit. The twist in episode 4 is super interesting. But I don't really think it connects everything at the end in a very cohesive way. So